Someone just walked out of a meeting about you and said, "We need to rethink everything." Most people would hear that and feel fear. Doubt would creep in. Questions would start racing through the mind. What went wrong? What did they say? What does this mean for the future? But what if that moment is not a threat? What if it's a signal? Because that sentence doesn't come from weakness. It doesn't come from something average. Nobody says, "We need to rethink everything because of something ordinary." That kind of reaction only happens when something disrupts expectations. When something challenges the way things have always been done. When something forces people to pause and question their assumptions. And that something is you. You didn't fit into their system the way they expected. You didn't follow the same patterns. You didn't play it safe or predictable. And because of that, you created pressure. Not loud pressure, not obvious pressure, but the kind that makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to think differently. That discomfort is powerful. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid it. They try to blend in, to be accepted, to follow what is already proven. They don't want to stand out because standing out brings attention, and attention brings judgment. So they stay within the lines even if it means staying small. But when someone says we need to rethink everything, it means you stepped outside those lines. You challenged the structure without even trying to. You introduced something that couldn't be ignored. And now they have a choice. They can dismiss it, pretend it doesn't matter, and go back to what is comfortable. Or they can face it. They can question what they believed before. They can admit that something needs to change. Either way, you've already done something significant. Because real impact is not measured by applause. It's measured by disruption. It's measured by the moments when people have to stop and reconsider. When they can't continue the same way because something new has entered the equation. That's what growth looks like from the outside. It looks like confusion, like uncertainty, like resistance. But from the inside, it's progress. You have to understand that not everyone will react positively to change. Some will resist it. Some will question it. Some will try to minimize it because it challenges their comfort. That's normal. What matters is not their reaction. What matters is your direction. If you start adjusting yourself based on every reaction, you lose what made you different in the first place. You become predictable. You become safe. And in doing so, you lose the very thing that created impact. Instead, you have to trust the process. You have to understand that being misunderstood at first is part of doing something meaningful. When people don't immediately understand you, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It often means you're early. Every shift begins with resistance. Every new idea faces doubt. Every different approach is questioned before it is accepted. That's the pattern. So when you hear that someone walked out of a room and said everything needs to be rethought, don't see it as rejection. See it as evidence. Evidence that you made them think. Evidence that you disrupted something. Evidence that you are not operating at the level of the average. And that comes with responsibility. Because once you reach that point, you can't go back to being ordinary. You can't pretend not to see what you see. You can't ignore the fact that you have the ability to shift things. Now the focus has to be on consistency. It's not enough to create one moment of impact. You have to build on it. You have to continue refining, improving, and pushing forward because real change doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens through repeated effort. There will be moments where it feels like nothing is happening. Moments where the reaction fades, where the attention shifts elsewhere. But that doesn't mean the impact is gone. It means the process is continuing beneath the surface. Stay with it, because the same people who question at the beginning often become the ones who recognize the value later. But that recognition only comes if you remain consistent. If you stop, if you doubt yourself, if you shrink back into comfort, the moment disappears. It becomes just another missed opportunity. But if you continue, if you build on what you started, if you stay focused on your direction, that moment turns into something much bigger. It becomes a shift. And that's the real goal. Not to impress, not to be accepted, not to fit in, but to create something that forces change. Something that moves things forward. Something that leaves an impact that cannot be ignored. So don't be afraid of that sentence. Embrace it. Because it means you are not just participating. You are influencing. You are not just following. You are leading in your own way. And while others are trying to figure out what to do next, you already know. You keep going. When people react strongly enough to say that everything needs to be rethought, it reveals something deeper than simple disagreement. It shows that what you presented did not fit neatly into their expectations. It did not align with what they were used to seeing or hearing. And that kind of reaction does not come from something average. It comes from impact. Most people move through systems in a way that keeps everything stable. They follow patterns, meet expectations, and operate within boundaries that have already been accepted. This creates a sense of predictability. Nothing is challenged, nothing is disrupted, and everything continues as it has before. In that environment, approval is easy to get because nothing is being questioned. But approval and impact are not the same thing. Approval comes from fitting in. It comes from meeting expectations and reinforcing what is already known. It is comfortable both for you and for others. There is no tension, no resistance, and no need for change. But because of that, it rarely leads to anything meaningful. It maintains the current state without improving it. Impact, on the other hand, comes from disruption. It happens when something challenges the existing way of thinking, when something introduces a new perspective, a new idea, or a new standard that forces people to reconsider what they believed before. This creates tension because it requires change, and people naturally resist change. When something disrupts their understanding, it creates discomfort. Not because it is wrong, but because it is wrong. But because it is unfamiliar. It forces them to step outside their comfort zone and question what they thought was certain. This is why impact often looks like rejection at first. When someone says that everything needs to be rethought, it does not mean you failed. It means you introduced something that could not be ignored. You shifted the conversation from routine to reconsideration. This is where many people misunderstand the situation. They hear strong reactions and assume they did something wrong. They interpret resistance as rejection and begin to doubt themselves. They start to think that if they had just been more agreeable, more aligned, or more predictable, things would have gone more smoothly. And they are right. It would have been smoother. It would have been easier. But it would not have created impact, because impact is not smooth. It is not comfo. Rateable. It does not happen without resistance. It requires pushing against existing ideas and introducing something that challenges the norm. This is why the phrase, "we need to rethink everything," is so powerful. It signals that the existing structure is no longer enough, that something you brought forward exposed a gap, a weakness, or a limitation in the current thinking. It forced people to pause and consider the possibility that what they believed before may not be complete. That is not a small outcome. It is a shift. And shifts are where progress begins. Most people spend their time trying to be accepted. They adjust their ideas, soften their perspectives, and align themselves with what is already agreed upon. They do this to avoid conflict, to gain approval, and to feel secure. But in doing so, they limit their impact. They become part of the system rather than a force that changes it. Creating impact requires a different approach. It requires the willingness to stand by your perspective even when it is not immediately accepted. It requires the ability to handle resistance without losing confidence. It requires understanding that strong reactions are often a sign that you are doing something meaningful. This does not mean ignoring feedback or refusing to improve. It means distinguishing between rejection that comes from misunderstanding and feedback that helps refine your approach. There is a difference between being wrong and being different. Being wrong means your idea lacks value or accuracy. Being different means your idea challenges what is currently accepted. The two can look similar at first because both can create resistance, but over time, the difference becomes clear. Ideas that are wrong fade away. Ideas that are different often grow stronger as they are understood. Another important aspect of impact is that it is not always immediate. When something challenges existing thinking, it takes time for people to process it. Initial reactions may be defensive or dismissive, but as the idea settles, as it is revisited and reconsidered, its value may become more apparent. This is why consistency is important. If you create impact once and then step back, the moment can be lost. But if you continue to present, refine, and build on your ideas, the impact grows. It moves from a single reaction to a lasting influence. Over time, what was once questioned can become accepted. What was once resisted can become standard. But this transformation only happens if the initial impact is followed by continued effort. There is also a personal aspect to this. Creating impact changes how you see yourself. It shifts your focus from seeking approval to creating value. Instead of asking whether others agree, you begin to ask whether your ideas contribute something meaningful. This shift is important because it gives you control over your direction. When you rely on approval, your actions are influenced by others. You adjust based on their reactions, and your path becomes uncertain. But when you focus on impact, your direction becomes clearer. You are guided by your purpose rather than by external validation. This does not eliminate doubt or uncertainty. Those will always be present, but it gives you a stronger foundation to stand on. Ultimately, the difference between approval and impact comes down to this. Approval maintains what exists. Impact changes it. And when someone reacts strongly enough to say that everything needs to be reconsidered, it is a sign that something has shifted. You did not just participate. You influenced. You did not just follow. You challenged. And while approval may feel good in the moment, impact is what creates lasting change. That is what moves things forward. And that is what truly matters. Discomfort is one of the most misunderstood signals in any environment. Most people see it as something negative, something to avoid, something that indicates a problem. But in reality, discomfort, right, is often a sign that something important is happening beneath the surface. It appears when previously patterns are challenged, when expectations are disrupted, and when new possibilities begin to emerge. When your presence, your ideas, or your actions create discomfort, it does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. In many cases, it means you are doing something different. And difference is what triggers growth. Think about how most systems operate. They are built on repetition and familiarity. People become comfortable with certain ways of thinking, certain methods of doing things, and certain expectations about outcomes. Over time, these patterns become fixed. They feel safe because they are predictable. They do not require much thought because they are already understood. But this comfort comes with a cost. When everything stays the same, progress slows down. Innovation becomes limited. Opportunities for improvement are overlooked because there is no pressure to change. The system continues to function, but it does not evolve. Discomfort is what interrupts this cycle. It forces attention. It creates a pause. It introduces uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, there is space for something new to develop. When people feel uncomfortable, it is often because something they believed is being questioned. It might be a process they trusted, an idea they relied on, or a way of thinking they assumed was correct. When that belief is challenged, it creates tension. That tension is not a weakness. It is a signal. It shows that the current understanding is being tested. It shows that there is potential for growth. But most people resist this process. They try to eliminate discomfort as quickly as possible. They dismiss new ideas, avoid difficult conversations, or return to familiar patterns. This is because discomfort requires effort. It requires nicking, adjusting, and sometimes admitting that something needs to change. Avoiding discomfort keeps things stable, but it also keeps them limited. Embracing discomfort, on the other hand, opens the door to improvement. When your actions create discomfort, it means you have introduced something that does not fit neatly into the existing structure. You have disrupted the routine. You have created a moment where people have to reconsider. This is where growth begins. Growth does not happen in comfort. It happens in the space where things are uncertain, where ideas are being tested, and where change is possible. For example, when a new approach is introduced, it often feels uncomfortable at first. It may seem unfamiliar, even risky. People may question it, resist it, or doubt its effectiveness. But if that approach is valuable, it eventually leads to better results. The initial discomfort was not a sign of failure. It was a necessary step in the process of improvement. The same applies to personal growth. Whenever you step outside your comfort zone, you experience discomfort. Whether it is learning something new, taking on a challenge, or pursuing a different path, there is always a period of uncertainty. This is because you are moving beyond what is familiar. But it is in this space that development occurs. Skills are built, perspectives expand, and confidence grows. None of this happens without discomfort. Another important aspect is that discomfort reveals limitations. When something feels uncomfortable, it often highlights areas that need improvement. It shows where understanding is incomplete, where systems are outdated, or where habits are no longer effective. This awareness is valuable. It provides an opportunity to address weaknesses and make improvements. Without discomfort, these limitations might remain hidden. There is also a difference between destructive discomfort and productive discomfort. Destructive discomfort comes from situations that are harmful or misaligned with your values. It creates stress without growth. Productive discomfort, on the other hand, comes from challenge. It pushes you to think differently, to adapt, and to improve. Learning to recognize this difference is important. When discomfort is productive, it should not be avoided. It should be explored. It should be understood. Another key factor is perspective. If you view discomfort as a problem, you will try to eliminate it. But if you view it as a signal, you will pay attention to it. You will ask what it is showing you, what it is revealing, and how it can be used to improve. This shift in perspective changes how you respond. Instead of reacting with resistance, you respond with curiosity. Instead of avoiding the situation, you engage with it. Over time, this approach builds resilience. You become more comfortable with discomfort. You learn to navigate uncertainty without losing direction. You develop the ability to stay focused even when things feel challenging. This resilience is a powerful advantage. While others avoid discomfort and remain in familiar patterns, you move forward. You continue to grow, to adapt, and to improve. There is also a broader impact. When you create discomfort in a system, you create the possibility for change. You challenge existing ideas, introduce new perspectives, and encourage others to think differently. Not everyone will accept this immediately. Some will resist, some will question, and some will try to maintain the status quo. But over time, the impact becomes clear. The discomfort you created leads to discussions, adjustments, and eventually improvement. What was once resisted becomes understood. What was once uncomfortable becomes accepted. This is how progress happens. It is not smooth. It is not easy. It involves tension, uncertainty, and effort. But it leads to better outcomes. Ultimately, discomfort is not something to fear. It is a signal that something is shifting. It shows that boundaries are being pushed, that ideas are being challenged, and that growth is possible. And when you understand this, you stop trying to avoid discomfort. You start using it. Because in the end, comfort keeps things the same. But discomfort is what moves things forward. One of the most critical moments in any journey toward meaningful impact comes after you've created a strong reaction. When something you've said or done disrupts expectations, challenges thinking, or forces others to reconsider, there is often a subtle pressure that follows. That pressure is not always spoken, but it is felt. It comes in the form of expectations, opinions, and the desire for things to return to what feels comfortable. This is where many people make a quiet but significant mistake. They begin to adjust themselves to fit those expectations. At first, it may seem like a smart move. You might think that softening your approach, aligning more closely with what others expect, or becoming less disruptive will make things easier. It reduces tension. It creates smoother interactions. It brings a sense of acceptance. But what it also does is remove the very thing that created your impact in the first place. The uniqueness that challenged thinking begins to fade. The clarity that made people stop and reconsider becomes diluted. Instead of standing out, you start blending in. And once that happens, the influence you had begins to disappear. This is the cost of shrinking to fit expectations. It is not always obvious at first. In fact, it can feel like progress because it brings immediate approval. People respond more positively. There is less resistance. Conversations become easier. But beneath that surface, something important is lost. You are no longer creating change. You are maintaining comfort. There is a natural desire to be accepted. It is part of human nature. Being aligned with others, being understood, and being supported feels good. It creates a sense of belonging, but when acceptance becomes the priority, it can limit your ability to do something meaningful. Because meaningful work often requires standing apart. It requires presenting ideas that are not immediately accepted. It requires holding a perspective that may be questioned. It requires the courage to continue even when there is resistance. Shrinking to fit expectations removes that courage. It replaces it with caution. Instead of asking what is right or valuable, you begin asking what is right or valuable. You begin asking what will be accepted. Instead of focusing on impact, you focus on approval. And time, this shift changes your direction. You begin to filter your thoughts before expressing them. You avoid saying things that might create discomfort. You choose safety over honesty. And while this may protect you from criticism, it also prevents you from making a difference. Another important aspect is that expectations are constantly changing. If you base your actions on what others expect, you will always be adjusting. There is no stable point because expectations vary from person to person and situation to situation. Trying to meet all of them is not only exhausting, but impossible. This creates inconsistency. You may find yourself changing your approach depending on the environment, which weakens your clarity and direction. Instead of being guided by your own understanding, you are guided by external reactions. This is why it is important to stay grounded in your own perspective. This does not mean ignoring feedback or refusing to improve. It means evaluating feedback carefully and deciding what aligns with your direction. It means being open to learning without losing your core. There is a difference between growth and compromise. Growth strengthens your ideas. It refines your approach. It makes you more effective. Compromise, when taken too far, weakens your position. It removes the elements that made your ideas strong in the first place. Understanding this difference allows you to evolve without losing your identity. Another challenge is dealing with resistance. When you choose not to shrink, you will face moments where your ideas are questioned or misunderstood. This can create doubt. You may wonder if adjusting would make things easier, and it would. But easier does not always mean better. The goal is not to avoid resistance. The goal is to use it as a signal. Resistance often indicates that something meaningful is being challenged. It shows that your ideas are strong enough to create a reaction. Instead of seeing resistance as something to eliminate, you can see it as part of the process. This perspective changes how you respond. Instead of retreating, you stay consistent. You continue to present your ideas, refine them, and build on them. Over time, this consistency creates clarity. What was once questioned begins to be understood, but this only happens if you remain true to your direction. Another important factor is confidence. Confidence does not come from approval. It comes from understanding. When you are clear about your ideas and why they matter, you are less dependent on external validation. This allows you to stand firm, even when there is uncertainty. Confidence also creates stability. It prevents you from making reactive changes based on temporary reactions. It keeps your actions aligned with your long-term goals. There is also a long-term impact to consider. When you stay consistent and do not shrink, you build something that stands out. Your ideas develop, your influence grows, and your impact becomes stronger. And your impact becomes stronger. And your impact becomes stronger. You create a distinct position that is recognized over time. But if you constantly adjust to fit expectations, your work becomes diluted. It loses its edge. It becomes similar to everything else. And in a world where attention is limited, being similar is not enough. Ultimately, the choice comes down to this. Do you want to be accepted, or do you want to create impact? Acceptance is immediate but limited. Impact takes time, but it lasts. Choosing not to shrink is not always easy. It requires patience, confidence, and the willingness to face resistance. But it is what allows you to build something meaningful. It is what allows you to stay aligned with your purpose. And it is what ensures that the moment you created does not fade, but grows into something much greater over time. A single moment can create attention, but attention alone does not create lasting change. It is easy to produce a strong reaction once, to say something that disrupts thinking, or to do something that stands out. That moment can spark interest, raise questions, and even shift perspectives briefly. But if nothing follows it, the effect fades. The reaction becomes temporary, and the system returns to what it was before. This is why consistency matters. Consistency is what turns a moment into a movement. It is what transforms a single disruption into a lasting shift. Without it, even the most powerful ideas lose their strength over time. With it, even small ideas can grow into something significant. When you create a moment of impact, you open a door. You introduce something new, something that challenges the existing way of thinking. But that door does not stay open on its own. It requires repeated effort to keep it open, to expand it, and to allow others to move through it. This is where most people fall short. They rely on the initial reaction. They expect that one moment will be enough. When the attention fades or when immediate results do not appear, they lose momentum. They move on, shift focus, or stop pushing forward, but real change does not happen instantly. It requires reinforcement. Every time you repeat your message, refine your approach, or build on your ideas, you strengthen the impact. You make it clearer, more understandable, and more difficult to ignore. Over time, what was once new becomes familiar, and what was once questioned begins to be accepted. This process is not fast. There will be periods where it feels like nothing is happening. The initial excitement is gone. The reactions are quieter, and the progress is not immediately visible. This is where consistency becomes difficult, because it requires effort without immediate feedback. But this is also where it becomes powerful. Continuing to move forward during these quiet periods is what separates temporary impact from lasting influence. It shows commitment. It shows belief in the direction you are taking. It allows your ideas to develop beyond their initial form. Another important aspect of consistency is refinement. The first version of anything is rarely the best. When you continue working, you begin to improve. You see what works, what does not, and where adjustments are needed. Each repetition becomes stronger than the last. This gradual improvement builds quality. Over time, your ideas become clearer, your approach becomes more effective, and your impact becomes more precise. This does not happen in a single moment. It happens through repeated effort. Consistency also builds trust. When people see something once, they may be curious. When they see it repeatedly, they begin to pay attention. When they see it consistently over time, they begin to trust it. True, is not built through a single action. It is built through a reliability. When your actions align with your message, when your efforts continue even without immediate recognition, it creates a sense of stability. People begin to understand what you stand for and what you represent. This trust amplifies your impact. It turns your ideas from something that is noticed into something that is followed, respected, and eventually adopted. Another key element is discipline. Consistency is not based on motivation. Motivation changes. It comes and goes depending on circumstances, energy, and emotions. If you rely on motivation alone, your efforts will be inconsistent. Discipline ensures that you continue regardless of how you feel. It creates a structure that supports your actions. It allows you to maintain progress even when it is difficult. Over time, this discipline becomes a habit, making consistency easier to sustain. There is also a compounding effect. Each consistent action builds on the previous one. Progress accumulates. What started as a small effort grows into something larger. The impact increases, not because of a single action, but because of a single action, but because of many actions working together over time. This is how movements are created. They are not the result of one moment, but of many moments connected by consistency. Another important factor is resilience. There will be challenges. There will be resistance, setbacks, and moments of doubt. Consistency requires the ability to continue despite these obstacles. It requires staying focused on your direction, even when the path is not clear. Resilience keeps the movement alive. Without it, progress stops at the first difficulty. With it, progress continues even under pressure. There is also a shift in mindset.